All right, for those of you in 6th hour, we're a little bit ahead, so kind of you might fast forward about 5 minutes in this class. So we're talking about Hoover, and just make sure this is working. This is working. Okay, so Hoover's belief in the individual is very important to how he governs. Okay, because he was a self-made man, an orphan that made millions of dollars, and also gave back. But when the Depression hits, okay, he has a lot of faith in people that they can take care of themselves. Okay, and so historians, political scientists look back at Hoover and like to blame him for the Depression. I don't know if that's completely fair. Now, it's certainly fair to criticize him for not doing more, but you have to understand, guys, the federal government just didn't do much back in the 1920s. Okay, they built roads, they funded an army, a navy, and so forth. But they didn't really get involved in the daily lives of individuals. That was left to local governments. Okay, and even state governments really didn't get involved in people's lives. Okay, and so Hoover has difficulty with this. So, he calls on charities, city, state, to help feed the poor. Okay, and that happens. I mean, guys, nobody starves to death in the Great Depression. Are people malnourished? Yes. Okay, for certain. Okay, do people go hungry? Yes, but nobody starves to death. All right, not in this country. All right. Now, they brought business leaders together to the White House. Hey, if you can keep wages up, people will still have money to buy products. And hopefully we can work our way out of this thing. Okay? But remember, the middle class just wasn't big enough, strong enough to pull that weight. The income tax cut. And I alluded to this earlier, guys. Remember, Mellon wanted the income tax to drop to 25%, and it did in 1924. So if you're going to cut taxes in 1929, 1930, 31, there's not much room to cut them. Okay, so it's not going to have much of an impact. Now, Mellon talks about the traditional approach. If businesses can't survive, if you can't make money, if you can't make a buck, well, if you can't stand the heat, get out of the kitchen. We're not going to bail you out. And you remember in government class we talked about bailouts of General Motors, of the big banks, and so forth. Mellon's not going to do that. Hoover's not going to do that. Okay? What Hoover will do, and pretty much everything we look at with Hoover that he will do starts with an L, and that is loan. He will loan you money to help you. You got to pay it back. But he's not going to give you something for nothing. Okay, now that approach is far different than what we see in the world today. Okay, they talk a lot about your generation these days, don't they? Have you guys seen some of the videos and, sociologists and so forth talk about your generation? That it's a generation of instant gratification. Tell me what it is now. I want it now. Type of thing, okay? That you don't really have to work for it. You don't have to sweat over it. It just, give it to me now, okay? And I don't know if there's a ton of truth to that or not, but it is interesting to look at what this technology that we have, and you guys were born with it, right? You guys were playing on iPads and phones when you were kids? No. You not yet? That was my little. Okay, now my daughter, who's 12, was born with it. You know what I mean? You just missed that. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, of course. Yeah, did you have a question? Yeah. Secretary of Treasury under Harding, Coolidge, and Hoover. Okay? With 2 L's. Purge the rottenness from the system. Aid for farmers and for businesses. Okay, this is what Hoover's willing to do. Okay, so he says we're going to create this marketing bill. So they create the Federal Farm Board, which is still around today. Okay, and I'm glad you're in here because you might be able to help us with some farming stuff. Okay, and I'll pick on you a little bit. over the next chapter or two when we get to the New Deal too. Okay, but what they did is, here it is, the word, the L word. Okay, they loaned $500 million to farmers to market their crops. Basically, what that means is to sell their crops, help them sell their crops. All right, and the goal here is to keep prices steady for farmers, so they can pay their mortgage, they can pay the, what they owe on their farm equipment and so forth. What ended up happening is the government started buying up these crops because they couldn't sell it for them. Couldn't keep prices up. And so in 1939 or 31, you see the bushel of wheat dropped from $1 a bushel to 61 cents a bushel. And cotton goes from 16 cents a pound to 6 cents a pound. Okay? Guys, this is devastating. Okay, that's like a 40% drop for wheat farmers, and more than that for cotton. Okay, this turns into a loss of about $185 million for the government. But we're trying to help farmers. Now, Hoover goes to Congress. He says, we need to help these cotton farmers. We're going to raise the tariff on textiles. What are textiles? Okay, could be burlap, could be clothing, right? Linens, right? And you guys know, you studied this. We used to have a lot of textile industry in this country where we would have factories where people would make this stuff. Okay? And most of it's made overseas now, or Mexico, Guatemala, Taiwan. It's all over, we farm that out. But so he just wants a revision on the textile tariff. Well, Congress is going to come back with something much bigger. Okay? They're going to come back with what's called the Hawley-Smoot Tariff Act. Hawley-Smoot? Anyone? Anyone? Class? Anyone? Bueller? Bueller?
Joseph's not here.
Huh?
Joseph's not here.
No, it's okay. Have any of you guys seen that movie?
Oh, yeah.
Ferris Bueller's Day Off?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Like, I got that reference like this.
Okay, yeah. So, okay, if you've seen the movie, picture the actor that's playing the teacher.
Okay.
Ben Stein. Okay, he used to have a show on Comedy Central called Win Ben Stein's Money. See, what most people don't know about Ben Stein, besides the fact that he's a very dry actor, he does the dry eyes commercials, and he's Jewish. Okay, his name's Stein. Okay, and but as an actor, guys, he's a Harvard-educated economist. Okay, that does acting on the side. All right, yeah. So Stein was given this role to be this really boring teacher. And if you watch the clip, you got students zoned out, drooling on the desks. And they said, just talk about something, economics and history or something.
Economics.
Yeah, he talks about voodoo economics. Yeah, but what does he talk about? He talks about the Hawley-Smoot Tariff Act, okay? Congress overdoes it. They pass this, okay, tariffs on thousands of items, okay? And if you remember when we talked about how tariffs clog trade, this is going to really clog trade. Imports and exports by the United States within 17 months will be cut in half, in large part due to the Hawley-Smoot Tariff Act, okay? And that's why Ben Stein chose to talk about that in the movie Ferris Bueller's Day Off, okay? At the end of class, we'll stop with a few minutes, and I'll show you. There's a 2-minute clip I found. I showed it to the other class, the 6th hour the other day. So now we're caught. I think we're about caught up. Okay, but this will have a devastating effect on the economy. Okay, and will help lead us deeper into depression. Remember, if we're not exporting our goods, we're not selling stuff, the factory's going to slow down. If other countries can't sell their goods here, they don't have money to buy our stuff. Okay? And that is going to help the depression spread not just here, but around the world. Okay? So this is a worldwide depression. There are few countries that are not impacted by this. Okay?
Was ours the worst?
No. Germany was worse. Okay. But not for long. You're going to get a savior. Okay? Alright.
the video.
Alright. So 6th hour, this is where we're starting here. 9 minutes in. Okay. 10 minutes in. Alright, now, bank failures. I alluded to this the other day. When you did the margin loans, remember that? When people were borrowing money to invest in the stock market, farmers unable to make money, they couldn't pay back their loans. Homeowners that can't pay their mortgages, banks are in trouble, guys, okay? So in all of these situations, this is an issue of cash, all right? So when you give money, you have your savings account, right? Everybody got a savings account? Okay, almost everybody in here's got a savings account. So does the bank just leave that money in there? No. Okay? No. They loan it out. And they charge interest for those loans, and that's how banks make money. They use your money to make money, and they give you a little bit of interest for it. Okay? Now, it's an issue of cash. So, I'll just go back. Okay? When the stock market crashes and banks had given out all these margin loans, the banks are going to wind up with less. Good. Okay. All right. Now, when farmers can't sell their crops at a big enough profit to pay back their loans, the banks have less. Good. And when people lose their job and they start selling their furniture and their other possessions just to keep a roof over their head, but eventually they run out of money to pay their mortgage, the banks have less. And when people find out the banks have less or no, what do people do?
They freak out.
They freak out and they run to the banks, right? To get out their
Cash.
But they don't have any.
Cash.
So they shut their doors. Can you explain that to me on the test?
Yeah.
Okay?
Use the word cash of 10 times. Start writing cash.
Johnny can.
Yeah, so, guys, rural banks are really the first ones to be hit, but you can see from this graphic, 1929, 659 banks fail. 1930, 1,300, 1931, 2,200, and down here in 33, 5,100 banks will fail. That's a quarter of all the country's banks, yeah.
So what happened to people's savings? They just disappeared?
There's no FDIC. There's no protection. There's no insurance. It's gone.
So
9 million individual bank accounts will be wiped out. Yeah, I'm going to show you a video here in a minute that will talk about this. Yeah.
but nowadays there's protections too.
Yeah, we do have the FDIC today. Okay. Well, it's in our notes in the next chapter, but it's called the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, and member banks that are members of the Federal Reserve get protection up to $250,000, right? Yeah.
So at this time, just making sure, was it completely cash? Like, they didn't have any type of...
Oh, I think they were using checks back then. Credit cards were not invented yet.
Yeah.
But a lot of people bought on credit. So, like, if you went to the store, that you had an account.
Okay, so accounts, like, did they still exist? Was there still money on accounts, or were they just gone?
In the bank, well, with the banks, your money that was in the bank, if they ran out of cash, it was gone. And that's called a run on banks, right? You guys know. Have you ever seen the movie It's a Wonderful Life? What? Who said no? Cole. Marie. You've seen this? Isn't it one of the best Christmas movies ever? Yes, Jimmy Stewart. Okay, yeah, write that down. It's a Wonderful Life. It's in black and white. Okay.
You have to watch it. What are you wearing?
All right. So, yeah, many people are left penniless here. So I do have a video. Let me pull it up real quick. It's like a 3-minute thing on bank failures.
Why did you say It's a Wonderful Life, though?
Say that again?
Why did we bring up It's a Wonderful Life?
Oh, in the movie, Uncle what's his name loses the deposit to the bank, and they have a savings and loan, and people find out that they don't have any money or not much money, so they all run to the banks. Hard times, fallout. Oh, here it is. Bank failure. Okay.
Only people with money. Money in the bank in this life. And it's gone.
That's as low as it goes. Trying to get the screen on there. All right. It's about 2 or 3 minutes.
But the collapse of the stock market wasn't the only cause of the nation's financial woes. The federal government of the 1920s had supported big business with low interest rates and very little governmental regulation, especially over the stock market. In turn, many businesses borrowed more money to expand than they could ever afford to repay. High tariffs that had kept American business owners happy because they kept foreign-made products out of the U.S. unfortunately meant many European countries were unable and increasingly unwilling to buy American-made products. For instance, Germany was barely able to pay the World War I reparations she owed, and high tariffs like the Hawley-Smoot Tariff Act, passed by Congress in 1930, only made matters worse. The tariff's goal was to protect American farmers and manufacturers, but it backfired. America found itself unable to sell her farm goods and manufactured products abroad. World trade in turn faltered as foreign countries imposed severe tariffs of their own in retaliation. Many key industries were struggling even before Black Tuesday. Throughout the boom times of the Roaring '20s, agriculture had been in a tailspin. The textile, steel, automobile, and railroad industries were also beginning to feel the pinch. As the unemployment rate increased, most families bought even less. The gap between the handful of wealthy Americans and the rest of the population got even wider. Even though most Americans had not profited from the economic boom of the 1920s, they bought many exciting new products and services during this era of unrestricted credit, living well beyond their means. The banking industry, too, was hard hit. Some banks had invested heavily in the stock market and helplessly stood by as that money vaporized into thin air. As Americans began to realize the pitiful state of the troubled economy, many panicked and rushed to withdraw their savings from banks. Many banks simply couldn't instantly produce the cash demanded, and instead shut their doors, leaving depositors with nothing. Bank failures wiped out nearly 9 million individual savings accounts. 659 banks were closed in 1929, and by 1933, 1/4 of America's banks had failed.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting, and it gives you good background. Just kind of goes back over those issues. Okay. All right. All right. So next slide. That's that video we just watched. Okay. So the Depression begins, right? So this just kind of summarizes some of how it sinks deeper. The factory owners couldn't sell products, slowed down production or shut down, laid off workers. Those who lost savings couldn't buy anything. Severe economic depression. Okay. Unemployment by 1932, 12 million. Able-bodied people that couldn't find work. Okay. Now, that's about a 10% unemployment, but it doesn't tell the whole story. The fact that many of those that did have jobs were just working part-time. Let me give you an example how this might work. Take a community like Colwich. Okay, any of you guys live in Colwich? There we go. And you have one grocery store out there, right?
Yep.
What's it called?
Krause's.
Krause's. Okay, you guys all have seen Krause's before. Okay, how many people do you think work there? 10, 15?
I only see like 2 people there. I know of 2.
Huh?
I used to work
Oh, you did? How many people generally think have a job there?
7 or 8. I don't
Yeah.
know. I got paid under the table.
All right.
It was like 13.
Okay, so let's talk about this. So let's say you have 8 full-time employees. Okay, now in a small community like Colwich, and the people that work there probably live there, they know each other, and then the Depression hits. So Krause's is not selling near the amount of food and groceries and stuff that they had been. And so they're going to have to scale back on their workforce. But they don't want to damage, these are their family. I mean, these are like friends. And so instead of laying off 4 of the 8, they make all 8 part-time. And at least they have some income. And so this was a situation with a lot of employers that, had a heart and didn't want to lay everybody off. But they have to make money or they can't stay in business. So it's a difficult situation, and you can see the impact on those that lost their homes. And this is what Hoover called the greatest tragedy of the Depression was homelessness. When people lose their homes, okay? And so those that didn't have anywhere to go, and some of you might have heard this term before, Hoovervilles, okay, where people gathered. This is a makeshift little housing development in Central Park in New York City. Okay? Yeah.
Did Hoover only have one term?
Yes. Yeah. So these Hoovervilles would, pop up on empty street corners, empty lots, and obviously people are struggling. And this picture here wins a Pulitzer Prize. I think it's called Migrant Worker. And, they say a picture tells 1,000 words. What's going through this woman's mind as she's surrounded by her 2 children. You could ask things like, where's her husband? Is he off trying to find work? How am I going to provide for my children? What's our next meal going to be? All these sorts of things are kind of encompassed in this photograph. I had a pretty cool assignment in graduate school where we had to take a piece of art or a photograph or something like that and tell its story and do research on who took the picture, who painted it, and the background to it all. I did a photograph of Babe Ruth when he had retired, and he was an old, aging man, but in his prime, he was a giant. You know what I mean? And it's this picture of Babe Ruth, packed Yankee Stadium, and showed just his number, just his back, and he's leaning on a bat, and you can tell he's just a fragile old man at this point. And he came back to retire his jersey or something like that, put him in the Hall of Fame, and it was just a magnificent photograph. And you don't even need to see the face to know who it is, okay? Because it's number 3 wearing pinstripes. It's Babe Ruth, okay? This is a photograph you could do that with. I think some of you have seen the movie Cinderella Man. Probably not Marie because she doesn't like movies, but
My favorite movie is The Sound of Music, Sweet Home Alabama, and Sister Acts 2 and 1. And that is 4 movies.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
My favorite movie.
Good with the first one. The first one's good.
My favorite just because they're pretty much the only ones I've been
Okay. Well, Cinderella Man. How many guys have seen Cinderella Man? Okay, in this movie, they're in New York, and they go down to Central Park for the Hooverville, and there's Reds down there, and you guys know what Reds are. Okay, so this was a real thing. Now, this is the impact on the average American. Marriage rates dropped by 1/3. Can't afford to start a family. College enrollment is going to sink. Can't afford to go to college, and people did go hungry. Okay, so where there's hunger, guys, you're going to see. Now, this is a far different place than America today. If people were going hungry in our country today, I think you would see it a lot worse than what you saw back here in the Depression. Okay, so some of that impact is you're going to see some violence. Okay, desperate people will go on hunger marches. You will see some looting where people will steal, break into groceries and take the food. This did happen. Now, it wasn't a real common thing. Okay, but as you guys can imagine today, you know, if you've ever watched, I keep doing that. The Walking Dead, you know, I mean, people are freaking out. They're just, you know, they're going, you know. Okay. Forced evictions. And a lot of times, guys, these evictions were very difficult and usually would be left up to the sheriff, where he would have to go to a family's home and say, look, you know, you've had your 30 days. You have to leave. And so they would take all the belongings out of that house and put them on the street corner. And, I mean, it was a horrible scene. They would have auctions right there on the street where people would sell their stuff. For farmers, this was very difficult. You know, generations of families had worked on farms and so forth. And for the sheriff to come and say, you know, you guys have to vacate the property, it's heartbreaking. And sometimes turns violent. Now, probably the most famous work on this subject with farmers is The Grapes of Wrath by John Steinbeck.
Great book.
Did you ever see the film?
Oh, great.
I actually used to show it to my history classes, but most of the students fell asleep. So I stopped showing it. But if you know Steinbeck, my daughter's reading Pearl right now. She's a 7th grader. She's like, this book is so boring.
What are you talking about? No, it's not.
Pearl?
Great. That's a little short one.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
That's such a good book.
I'll tell her you liked it. Okay. But anyhow, Steinbeck's is about the Joad family, the Grapes of Wrath. And it tells the story of this family and how they go to California. And now, Cole, there are some serious socialism overtones in this book and film. Steinbeck was a socialist. And some people felt a communist. So, you know, it's good to know a little bit about that before you read that book. Otherwise, you kind of get sucked into that whole socialism thing. Okay, but so between 1930 and 1934, 1 million family farms. Now, how many people on average would live on a family farm? Okay, you got mom and pa, some kids. Eight? Grandma, grandpa.
15 people.
The aunt that never married.
Sam's there. Always there.
Sam's there. All right. So, conservative number, 8. That's 8 million people. Okay. So, where do they go? Now, Steinbeck would have you believe they all went to California, which is not the case. Okay. They went to the cities. Now, some did go west in the hope that there were jobs out there, a better life. And when they got out there, they found out that it wasn't any better in California, except the weather. Okay. Which could be good if you're homeless, right? So this is devastating. But people will generally go to the cities. And then remember the bonus bill. Okay, this is something I talked about earlier that was for veterans. It said that you would get $1 for every day you served at home. $1.25 was an insurance policy. You could borrow 25%. We did the math, and we came up with about $200 if you borrowed it. It didn't mature until 1945. But when the Depression hit, the bonus army, it became known as the bonus army. And they marched, about 25,000 of them, marched on Washington, D.C. to get that bonus bill, the Adjusted Compensation Act, cashed in. That would roughly be about $600 per veteran, which the government didn't have that money. So, but there was a bill going through Congress, and this is them on the steps of the Capitol, in support of passage of this bill. And they're trying to push this through Congress to give these veterans their money, and the bill fails. Okay? A lot of the 25,000 went home. They didn't have money to stay in hotels, okay? So they had set up camps, shanty towns. Well, the ones that didn't leave and go home because they didn't have anywhere else to go, They just stayed in D.C. And this is really close to the White House. And they started causing some problems. All right? And there was some violence involved, and basically Hoover got tired of them being in Washington, D.C. So he's going to call on the Army to deal with this, okay? Now, I was looking through this book on Eisenhower a while back, and I was just flipping through the pictures, and I found this picture of Eisenhower and who would become General Douglas MacArthur later on. Okay, they're both in the Army. Okay, Hoover's going to call on Eisenhower and MacArthur to drive these veterans out of their camp and force them to leave Washington, D.C. Okay, so you're a veteran, and this shows Eisenhower smoking a cigarette with MacArthur next to him. If you're a veteran, you see the Army marching down the street, okay, in formation. They've got horses and so forth. You're thinking, okay, what is this? This is a military parade. Yay, it's the Army. We're veterans. There's the Army. But no, they're not coming to do a parade. They're coming to drive us out of Washington, D.C. Chaos. They start using tear gas. Chaos breaks out. Shots are fired. People are killed. There's a young child that gets caught up in this tear gas and dies. What has Hoover just done? He just called out the Army on U.S. citizens, not just U.S. citizens, but veterans of this country. Oh, man. This is kind of what the aftermath looks like. Yeah, they set fire to the shanty town here. Okay? And you can see the Capitol Dome in the background. Okay? Yeah, I have a video. Okay? Right, so let me tee this up. What? It's this thing right here. Come on. If you move too fast, it won't go.
So I'll just set it here for the video.
I'm sorry?
Is it magnetic?
It's like a Bluetooth.
No, like to the...
Oh, no, it didn't stick to that.
Oh, did you just put it on the...
Thanks.
Okay. Veterans March on Washington. Okay?
Americans, already tired of Hoover's pessimistic and cautious approach, then became outraged by his treatment of a group of World War I veterans in 1932. After the war, Congress issued veterans bonus certificates for their military service worth nearly $1,000 to be redeemed in 1945. Dismayed by the economic outlook of the time, the veterans demanded the immediate payment of their bonuses in full. In an attempt to satisfy their demand, Texas Congressman Wright Patman proposed a bill in which the government would immediately give veterans $500 in cash instead. To show their support of Patman's plan, between 10 and 20,000 veterans and their families peacefully marched to Washington, D.C. This so-called bonus army established a shanty town inside of the Capitol building. Hoover provided food and supplies for them, but when Congress vetoed the bill on June 17, he asked the bonus army to leave. Most left, but approximately 2,000 stayed behind, hoping to meet with Hoover. Fearing a riot, Hoover ordered General Douglas MacArthur and the 12th Infantry Force to remove the veterans. Shocked Americans saw troops use bayonets and tear gas to force the vets to leave. In a melee, more than 1,000 people were gassed, an 8-year-old boy blinded, and an 11-month-old baby was killed. The shantytown burned to the ground. Public support for Hoover foundered, and with a chance to change direction, Americans overwhelmingly embraced a new president in Franklin Delano Roosevelt, popularly known as FDR.
Okay, yeah. I mean, Hoover is going to make a lot of people upset with this, okay?
Why did they give it to him?
Well, because he built it.
During the Depression.
Well, I mean, he didn't build it personally. He funded the project. It's not. Okay? Now, I want you to think. I want you to think of any other time in American history, not dealing with the British, okay, and the Boston Massacre, where the U.S. government used the military against its own citizens. Okay, Civil War, all right. It just doesn't happen very often, okay? And one example that is like to be used is, are you familiar with the Kent State Massacre? This is during the Vietnam War, okay? And the protesters in college campuses were a place where you saw a lot of protests. At Kent State, they had asked the protesters, okay, we've got your point, no more protests. Now, some of this was students and some of this was people coming from off campus to protest on the campus. You know what I mean? And so they said, that's enough. We're not going to do this anymore. And so they called in the National Guard. And so what you have is 18, 19, 22, 23-year-olds, right, protesting. And you have the National Guard with 18, 19, 20, 22-year-olds. You know, they're facing off against each other. Okay? And as they try to disperse the crowd, they throw some tear gas to get them out of there. And one of the National Guardsmen discharged his weapon. And that set off a barrage of, you know, somebody, shots fired, they started shooting. Next thing you know, there's 4 people dead on the campus of Kent State University. Now, Neil Young wrote a song about it. Okay? Any of you guys know this song? It's called Ohio. All right?
What year was that?
I believe it was 1972.